met u in gesprek te gaan. Fijn dat u bent, precies op de minuut. Dit is de Commissie Europese Zaken, waarvan ik de voorzitter mag zijn. En ik zou de leden willen vragen om heel kort zichzelf even voor te stellen. En dan begin ik met Farah. Farah.
Ja, goedemorgen. Mijn naam is Farah Karimi en ik ben senator namens GroenLinks-fractie.
Oké. En dan daarnaast hebben we Ilse.
Yes. Goedemorgen. Ik ben Ilse van den Driessen, staf van de Commissie Europese Zaken.
Daaronder Pim, die kent u.
Ja, Pim van Balkom, senator op het ogenblik. En voorheen vicepresident van de EIB.
Ja. En dan Bastiaan kom ik.
Ja, ik ben Bastiaan van Apeldoorn. Ik ben vicevoorzitter van deze commissie en senator voor de SP, Socialistische Partij.
Ja, en dan hebben we Fred daarboven.
Ik ben Fred Bergman en ben griffier van deze commissie.
Joris.
Ja, Joris Bakker, senator namens D66.
En dan, last but not least, Riets.
Ja, Ruud Kolen, senator namens de Partij van de Arbeid.
Ja. En dan ondergetekende, ik ben voorzitter van deze commissie, maar ook lid van het CDA. En senator. Goed, fijn dat u tijd voor ons wil vrijmaken. We hebben deze ontmoeting willen wij gebruiken in de aanloop naar een debat wat wij zouden hebben op 12 oktober. Er zijn er al wat wisselingen geweest in de regering. Dus we zullen straks, ik zeg dat nu voor de leden, we zullen straks met een e-mailprocedure kijken of we dat debat op 12 oktober laten doorgaan. Maar als dat niet doorgaat op 12 oktober, omdat de nieuwe minister, dat is Ben Knapen. En die heeft op dit moment ongelooflijk veel te doen met Afghanistan in de korte periode dat hij daar minister is. Dus wellicht moeten we het uitschuiven en er is ook al een nieuwe datum voor, dat is begin januari. Hoe dan ook, we kunnen de input die we van u krijgen, kunnen we heel erg goed gebruiken. En u is het woord.
Dank u, dames en heren. En eerst en vooral wil ik u danken voor uw uitnodiging om vandaag de tweede editie in feite van het verslag over de rechtsstaat te presenteren. Dus in minder dan 1 jaar hebben we al 2 edities van ons verslag voor 2020 en 2021. Ik ben mij ervan bewust dat de rechtsstaat een onderwerp is waaraan de Eerste Kamer veel belang echt en waaraan het veel aandacht besteedt. Niet alleen voor wat rechtsstaat in Nederland, maar ik heb veel debat gezien in de Eerste Kamer rond andere Europese landen, misschien ook buiten Europa voor wat rechtsstaat, mensenrechten en democratie betreft. Ik wil dan ook eerst mijn dank uitspreken voor de belangrijke steun vanuit Nederland voor de inspanning van de Europese Commissie om de rechtsstaat te bevorderen en te beschermen in de Europese Unie. Ik wil daarbij benadrukken dat de rechtsstaat voor de Europese Commissie van het allergrootste belang is. En het was zeer duidelijk in vele verklaringen van de president van de commissie, de voorzitter van de commissie, maar ook van andere leden van de commissie en niet alleen van mezelf. In juli heeft de commissie haar tweede verslag over de rechtsstaat gepubliceerd, heb ik gezegd. Dit verslag bevat een samenvatting van de belangrijke ontwikkelingen op het gebied van de rechtsstaat in de Europese Unie in het afgelopen jaar. Het is een verschil misschien met de vorige verslag. In het eerste verslag het was normaal om een presentatie te maken van de rechtsstaat in alle lidstaten in het algemeen. Maar nu het is meer precies voor wat de afgelopen 12 maanden. In feite, het is logisch, jaar na jaar, wij gaan naar zo'n evolutie met een presentatie van de evenement van 1 jaar en niet meer misschien een algemene presentatie van de rechtsstaat in een of andere Europese land. Het bevat ook specifiek beoordeling voor alle 27 lidstaten, waaronder natuurlijk ook voor Nederland. Evenals in het eerste verslag over 2020 hebben we dit jaar zowel positieve als negatief ontwikkeling onder de loep genomen, waarbij we de aandacht hebben gevestigd op nieuwe of groeiende uitdagingen. We lichten ook enkele goede praktijken uit. En dit verslag is het resultaat van een voortdurend werk dat we samen met alle lidstaten en verschillende stakeholders hebben verricht. En ik dank de Nederlandse overheid voor een zeer goede samenwerking voor wat de voorbereiding van ons verslag, maar ook een aantal organisaties van de civiele maatschappij. Het was ook zeer belangrijk om met vele acteurs te werken. Ik zal misschien nu meer in het Engels spreken. U weet dat wij werken meer en meer voor wat de recht staat in het Engels in de commissie. Dus ik zal misschien verder gaan in het Engels en dan ik zal een antwoord geven aan uw vraag. Niet alleen wat Nederland betreft, maar misschien ook voor wat evoluties in andere Europese land. President von der Leyen recently stated in her State of the Union address that protecting the rule of law is not just a noble goal, it is also hard work and a constant struggle for improvement. The rule of law reports are part of this process, and from next year onwards, they will include specific recommendations for member states. It was a request from the European Parliament. I know that it's also a request from different national parliaments after the 20 visits they have organized in a virtual way in different parliaments. And I'm sure that it will be important to come with recommendations. I would like to say a few words on the country chapter for the Netherlands of the 2021 report. The 2021 report follow-up on the 2020, of course, report. It focuses on the same 4 areas. Independence of the justice system, of course, and quality and effectiveness of the justice system, anti-corruption, media pluralism and media freedom, and other institutional issues related to checks and balances. As regards the justice system, the report notes that the level of perceived judicial independence in the Netherlands remains very high, and efforts to further improve it continue. The process of amendment of the appointment procedure for the Supreme Court judges, discussed already in the 2020 report, has advances. Furthermore, reflections are ongoing on the change of appointment procedure of members of the Council for the Judiciary and court management boards. I want to insist on the fact that it's a discussion in many member states, the composition of the Council for the Judiciary, because it's the top body, in fact, when we discuss about the independence of the justice system. We need to start with such a top body and then to see what is the process for the appointment of all the other judges, of course. I want to say that I've asked to the Slovenian presidency to organize an horizontal debate on the appointment of judges and the disciplinary procedures in December this year. We have already organized a first horizontal debate about the independence of the prosecutor office. It was also a discussion last year with the Netherlands. And we'll try to continue now with a discussion about the appointment of the judges and the accountability, in fact, of the judges, so the disciplinary procedure. Room for improvement of the digitalization of the justice system remains also in the Netherlands, when the report notes that efforts in this respect accelerated during the pandemic. The report also notes that some concerns persist as to the adequate funding of the current system for legal aid, and that the reform of the legal aid system is foreseen to be completed by 2025. With respect to the efficiency of the justice system, the pandemic has unfortunately created a backlog of cases in 2020 and 2021, which will need to be addressed. We have seen a similar impact in other member states as well. I want just to insist on the fact that in many member states we have received proposals for investment in the digitalization of the justice system, in the recovery and resilience plan. I know that we are waiting for a plan coming from the Netherlands due to the formation of the government, but of course I'm coming from a country where we are knowing that sometimes that takes some months or years to form a government. So now you will compete maybe with other countries in the Benelux and maybe with Germany in the record period of time to form a government. But again, maybe in the recovery and the resilient plan, it will be important to think about new investment in the digitization of the justice system. As regards the fight against corruption, the report acknowledges that the Netherlands is perceived as one of the least corrupt countries in the world, which was reported already in 2020. And the Netherlands continues to step up efforts to further combat corruption. An extensive program has been launched focusing on combating subversive organized crime, which includes corruption and steps to increase the effectiveness of the fight against corruption through amendment of the criminal code. Some concerns nevertheless remain, such as regarding the integrity framework for top executive functions within the public sector, as well as regards lobbying and revolving doors. This has also been pointed out by Greco, and you know that we are working with the Council of Europe in the way to prepare our report, and the support of Greco, like the support of the Venice Commission, is very important to the European Commission. As regards the situation of the media, the Netherlands continues to enjoy a high degree of media freedom. Unfortunately, the topic of safety of journalists has come to prominence also in the Netherlands following the murder of investigative journalist Peter de Vries, which has shocked all of us. An increase of threats and violence against journalists has been reported, and you know that it's a concern in different member states to see murders of journalists in different contexts, of course, in the different member states, but there are many threats against journalists, and we try to see how it's possible to react on this. The 2021 report notes as a positive development that the Persveiling program for reduction of threats, violence and aggression against journalists continues and is being increasingly used by journalists. It's very important to have a feedback from the journalists about the possible use of such a kind of program, Persveiling. Finally, the fourth and last part of the report relates to other institutional issues relating to checks and balances. Obviously, there's an important role to play for national parliaments in this respect. In particular, during the reporting period, extensive debates have taken place on the functioning of checks and balances in connection to the childcare allowances affair. Although it took time, the work of the Parliamentary Investigation Committee, the responses of institutional actors involved, and the ongoing debates illustrate how the system of checks and balances has functioned. And we have seen it already in the pandemic. Rule of law topics continue to take a prominent place in the public debate and also in the Senate. These discussions are very important as they contribute to the fostering of a genuine rule of law culture. This is exactly what the Commission's annual report the annual rule of law report, seeks to promote. I thank you for your attention. I want just to add that, of course, we have seen in the Netherlands, like in other member states, some threats against journalists, not only violences, but also threats on the social media. We are, of course, following now very closely the threats against some politicians and maybe against your prime minister for the moment. But it's also a concern in different member states to see violences against different kind of actors, not only the journalists, but maybe also some politicians and some other actors of the public life. It's very important to take care of this, and it's maybe also a concern for the next report that we will put forward. And I want to thank you for your attention. Of course, I'm looking forward to your comments and questions. And again, I'm very open to answer to your question about the situation in the Netherlands that you are knowing very well, of course, but also about the situation in other member states that we are reporting in our report and in the 27 country chapters. Just to your attention, I said that we increase our collaboration with the Council of Europe. We try also to do the same with the World Bank, because it's very important that we try to avoid any duplication, and we try to work together with international organizations about the way to analyze the situation of the rule of law. But that is not only for the 27 member states, it's also maybe in the candidate countries, in the Eastern Partnership, in the Southern Partnership, and in the important partnership that we try to build again with Africa. But that is another issue maybe than just the rule of law report. Thank you for your attention.
You have to unmute.
Many thanks, Mr. Commissioner, Didier, for your overview you gave. I'm actually in Strasbourg, and we discuss here quite often also Greco, and Greco as a tool which we also need to have in for our judicial work in the Netherlands. What I propose is that everybody who wants has a question, and then I will note it, and then there will come answers. The questions will be in English, I think. No, it's not needed. Okay, so it's up to you. So who is the first one?
Up to you in Engels.
Okay.
In English, in Dutch, or in French if you want.
In French also. Okay, who is the first one?
I'd like to.
I see the hand, Joris Bakker.
Yes.
Thank
you, Mr. Reynders, for your introduction. I want to commend the Commission for its very comprehensive report. I have one question which is related to the rule of law, and that is that I have checked the 11 criteria for evaluation of the resilient national plans, and I can't find a reference to the rule of law there. Could you elaborate on that issue? Because I think if it's a tool of effectiveness, it might be useful to make that link. Thank you.
What do you prefer? One after the other?
As you want, but this one is very concrete. I will take maybe this one, and then it's possible to take 2 or 3 questions together.
Okay,
but
that's good.
Joris Bakker was speaking about the actual work that we are doing about the resilience and recovery plan, recovery and resilience plan. Of course, not about Netherlands, I said, because we didn't receive till now your plan. Now, what's the difference? We are not explaining the relations between the different plans and the rule of law, because there's another element in the analysis of the plan. It's the relation with the country-specific recommendations that the Commission is providing during the European semester. And you know that for many member states, there are recommendations dedicated to give examples, the independence of the justice system, or the fight against corruption. So what we are saying in the rule of law report, it's also expressed in other tools like the country-specific recommendations during the European semester. And so it's the reason why, just to give an example, that we are in discussion now with the Polish authorities about the independence of the justice system, not only on the basis of our rule of law report, not only before the Court of Justice, because we have introduced infringement proceedings, but also in the recovery and resilience plan, because we have put forward a country-specific recommendation during the European semester about the independence of the justice system in Poland. And it's important in the recovery and resilience plan to put forward some reforms to give an answer to our recommendations. And so that's the link that you may see between the rule of law issues and the RRF, like we are saying, for those plans. The same, to be very concrete, about Hungary. There are discussions now about the ways to fight against corruption in Hungary, also in relation with the country-specific recommendations. But the fight against corruption is the second chapter of our rule of law report. So, of course, the rule of law report, it's an important instrument, but we have also in the analysis of the plans the reference to the country-specific recommendation. I will adjust that the rule of law report will be more a source of reflections for another kind of tool, the conditionality. You know that the President of the Commission has said in her speech on the State of the Union that we will start written procedures in the next weeks with some member states about the conditionality, so the link between the rule of law and the funding of the different policies in the member states. And for that, of course, the rule of law report is one of the main sources of information. But again, for the RRF, it's more in relation with the country-specific recommendation, but there you will find also independence of the justice system or fight against corruption, to give two very concrete examples. And it's not by coincidence, because you know that Hungary and Poland are not taking part in the European Public Prosecutor Office. And so, of course, we are paying attention to the independence of the justice system and the ways to fight against corruption, due to the fact that the EPPO has no competence in Hungary and in Poland. I'm hoping that it will be possible to change that in the future, but for the moment it's not the case. So to be very concrete, the relation that you mentioned is more with the country-specific recommendations in the European semester than to the rule of law report itself.
Thank you.
Bastiaan has the floor.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Commissioner, for having this opportunity for this exchange of views. And I think we've all read the report with great interest, and it's very valuable. And I think most of us agree that the rule of law is an integral part of European democracy and what I think should be our shared values in Europe. I have one remark and I have one question. The remark is that I also read with great interest the specific recommendations for this country. I think what you just noted about maybe problems that we have with regard to the revolving door and other aspects that have been recently in the news, also in line with the recommendations of by Greco. I think we should really take that to heart, and I hope that the new government, once it is formed, will give a proper reaction to that. But I have a question about another member state where the problems with the rule of law are actually still larger, which is Poland. And now we are all waiting for this ruling by the Polish Constitutional Court, which has been delayed several times, about the relation between Polish national law and European law, and whether the last one takes precedence or not. And this has, I think, is now being postponed until the end of this month, so that will be very soon. And of course, the question is what will then happen, and if possibly through this ruling of the Polish Constitutional Court, Poland will in effect place itself outside the European legal order. Which I think would be somewhat of a dramatic new development, escalating the current conflict, so to say, with regard to the rule of law between Poland and the rest of the EU. And I just wondered what your thoughts would be in terms of how the European Commission and the European Union at large could possibly react to such a ruling, politically as well as legally. What would be the avenues of possible action, or what would you foresee in terms of a possible scenario? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I give the floor. Good, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Commissioner, for your thoughts and your presentation. And I agree completely, like all of us, that the rule of law is very important, as well in the member states as at the European level. You also mentioned one of the events, the developments of the last years during the pandemic, that has in several countries has been a sort of backlog of cases, that the work is behind in the judicial system. And one of the solutions you propose is more digitalization of the legal system. And I have two questions there, because there's another possibility to speed up the work to diminish the number of cases still being done, and that is one solution that is done also in the Netherlands, and that is to take it away from the independent courts and the independent judges, and put some cases, the lighter cases, into the hands of the office of the prosecutor. My question is, does that happen in other countries as well? And what are your thoughts about this? Because that is something that is at least to some extent at odds with the rule of law and the independence, the independence of the judge to whom everybody has to have access to. And the second point, also with this solution you mentioned about digitalization, is does the Commission also consider the effects of digitalization for the citizens? That is, there are a number of really a lot of citizens that are, so to speak, digital illiterate. They don't know how to deal with it. And if we go forward to digitalize the digital system, what does that mean for the admissibility of citizens to the judicial system? I would like to hear your thoughts on that as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Then I give the floor to Farah Karimi. Farah?
Thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Commissioner, for your presentation and also for the report. So I have actually, I think, two concrete questions. The one is about the effectiveness of this instrument. This is now the second time that you are publishing this report. So I was wondering, what is your experience with the follow-up of your recommendations by the member states? If I am not mistaken, the idea is also to have a debate at the council about this report. So could you also give us a flavor of this kind of debate when it comes to really specific countries? Are they honest and they really talk to each other about the very important issues that you flag? And my second point is actually about the violence against journalists, what you point out, and that's rightly, and it's very, very, very concerning. But there is a difference between whether that violence comes from the state actors or it is done by other actors. So could you give us a kind of overview of what is your appreciation of the situation in the EU and in the different member states? What would you say is the main threat now? Is it the polarization in social media? Is it by criminal actors or the state actors? Thank you very much. You have to unmute, Ria.
Yeah, you are mute. Maybe I will try to give an answer to the three questions, and then
yes.
Yeah.
And then we go on. Thanks a lot. Yes.
Yes, to don't be too long in the answers. First of all, of course, thanks, Senator Appledown, about the question on Poland, because it's true that it's one of the main concern that we have seen. And first of all, when you look to the Constitutional Tribunal in Poland, it's very clear that we have some concerns about the independence of such a kind of body. And in its recent proposal of 2017 already, triggering the Article 7 procedure, the Commission concluded that the independence and legitimacy of the Constitutional Tribunal are seriously undermined, and consequently the constitutionality of Polish laws can no longer be effectively guaranteed. And the rule of law report recalls that there's concern over its independence and legitimacy raised by the Commission under the Article 7 have so far not been resolved. And you know that we continue to have hearings and state of play before the Council about the Article 7 procedure. Of course, I've seen the motion introduced by the Prime Minister to the Constitutional Tribunal to challenge the primacy of the EU law. The first reaction of the Commission is already taken, because I have sent a letter to the Polish authorities to ask to stop the process. And I'm very impressed by the independence of the Constitutional Tribunal, because we have seen that there is all the time a decision to postpone the discussion before the tribunal, maybe at the same pace than the discussion on the recovery and resilience plan. It's very strange, but that is the independence of the Constitutional Tribunal. But more concretely, of course, we will follow the situation very closely, and if there is some risk, or there are some risk in a possible decision of the Constitutional Tribunal about the primacy of the EU law in different fields, we will react, like we have decided to react in other cases. I don't want to recall the action that we have started after the decision in Karlsruhe. And in the same way, we want to avoid any spillover of such a kind of situation when there is a challenge to the primacy of the EU law. And for the rest, we continue, of course, our actions. I don't want to repeat what I've said about the recovery and resilience plan and the discussion about Poland, but we are also before the Court of Justice about the independence of the justice system in general. We have received a first positive decision about the disciplinary regime for the judges on the 15th of July, and we have received a decision on interim measures on the 14th of July. And now we are again before the court to ask daily financial sanction to ask to Poland to stop all the disciplinary procedures. So there are different ways. I want just to insist on one point that is very important maybe for your debates, is that there's a new step now in the discussions with Poland. Because before the decision of the court, I want to recall that it's normal for a member state to disagree with the Commission. It's a normal political debate. But when we have a decision of the Court of Justice, the highest court in Europe, it's another story. We are no more in a political debate. We are facing a binding ruling of a high court in Europe. And so it's a duty of all the member states to apply and to implement such a decision. So that's the situation that we are facing now in such a process. To recall, I want to say about the digitalization. Of course, first of all, nobody questioned the necessity, of course, to organize a digital transition also for the justice system. I want to answer to your two questions. First, maybe the second one, because it's maybe the most important, is the access to the justice system. It's true that we need to give some support to many citizens without a real capacity to have a digital access to justice system. So it's very important to maintain different form of access to that. And of course, we want to organize a real process with both ways to have an access to justice. Of course, it must be, first of all, for all the professionals, the lawyers, the tribunals, and so on, to work with digital tools, certainly for cross-border cases to exchange with digital tools, but it must be possible for the citizens to have another kind of access, or by the traditional way, or with the support of professionals to have access to the justice system. Like, if I may, I was Minister of Finance in my previous life many years ago, and we are working more and more with tax administration by digital tools. But it's normal that we are providing a support for many citizens to have an access also to tax administration. It's not pleasant, but it's needed also to be in contact with justice system or with tax administration. So be aware that in all communication about the digitalization of justice system, we have insist on this, the access for all, and so also a support for that. I know that in the Netherlands...
To interrupt on this point, we had a very poor system in the Netherlands, supporting the citizens.
Yeah.
But in the new budget for next year, there is coming a lot of new money to fill in that budget. So your bid has already come to the Netherlands, to the Dutch government. So there is already a result of what you said.
No, thank you, but we will continue to monitor that and to see what is the feedback from the ground, to see what are the reactions of citizens and civil society organizations about that. There is a lack of access or not. Of course, we will continue to follow the situation. If you look to the Netherlands country chapters, you will see that we mention that the prosecution service continues to make use of its power to render a decision itself on certain criminal cases in order to eliminate backlogs in the criminal justice system due to the COVID-19 pandemic. A first question when we are looking to that, it's to organize a real independence of the prosecutor office. And I know that there are also some discussions in the Netherlands about the way to give some instructions or not to the prosecutor office. I have discussed that with your Minister of Justice on the basis of the report 2020. But of course, it's very important also that not only we discuss about the independence of the prosecutor office, but also that the decisions can be contested before a court. So it must be possible to go to a court after the decision of the prosecutor office. And the provision of a free legal consultation is of particular importance to ensure the adequate information of citizens in such cases. And this is currently being provided to citizens for a number of cases. And so, of course, again, we'll continue to follow the developments in this respect, but it's important to pay attention to the independence of the prosecutor office, to the possible contestation of the decision before a court, and to see how it's possible to provide free legal consultation to the citizens to be able to take part in the process. So we are not against such a kind of process, but there are limits, to be very honest. And that's the main issue that we try to put forward. And to Ms. Karimi, first of all, the effectiveness of the report. I want to recall that the main goal of the rule of law report is to install a sort of culture of the rule of law in the EU. We have other tools to react if they have some breaches, like the infringement proceedings before the court, like the Article 7, but now also I said the conditionality, or the effectiveness through the recovery and resilience plan when we have put forward some recommendations in the European semester. But what I have seen are different elements. First of all, in a very large majority, I will say, of member states, a very positive reaction to try to improve the situation. So to try to send to the Commission some proposals for reforms, for action plan, to try to give an answer to all conclusions. It will be maybe clearer next year with the recommendations, because we will come with concrete recommendations, so it will be maybe easier to analyze the follow-up and to see if there are responses to all the different recommendations. So that's the first point. And I will add that we have had a good collaboration from all the member states, the 27, in the preparation of the plan, with some discussions with different member states, but a real participation. But that's the first element. In a very large majority of member states, we have received many action plans. Of course, the second element is that we will increase the debates. Well, we have today a new virtual discussion, but I want to announce you that I will travel to many, many member states already this year to be in contact with the parliaments, to be in contact with the civil society organizations. And I'm sure that it will be also the case in the Netherlands in the future. I will come again to see not only the parliament, but also the civil society organization. It's very important that we have the opportunity to engage. So to be concrete, I will go to Austria, to Italy, to Hungary, to Poland in the next months. And so it will be quite vibrant in some member states to discuss also with the civil society. A third remark is that of course, it's not enough to receive action plans. We need to see if there is a clear implementation. Just to give you an example, we have received a beautiful action plan from Bulgaria to answer to our first report. But now they are running for a third election in 1 year. And so without a government, without a clear signal from a new majority, it's quite difficult to implement. So we need in all the member states, not only to analyze the action plans, but to see if there is a clear implementation of the action plan, and in some cases, if there are enough resources in the implementation, because human resources, financial resources are very important in the functioning of the justice system or the fight against corruption or the regulation of the media. And then the last remark is the most important. I said we have received a good reaction from many member states, but in some member states, we have systemic issues with the rule of law. And it's the reason why we are more before the court, or we are more in other procedures with some member states. I must say that for the moment, we have real concern about the independence of the justice system in Poland, and we have a lot of huge discussions with Hungary. And it's not by coincidence that you have 2 Article 7 procedures in those 2 countries, and that we have more systemic concerns. And it's very clear if you read the country chapters, but I want to insist on it. In the majority of the member states, there's a real intention and a real message to improve the situation, and we will verify, of course, the effectiveness. But in some, it's more a systemic issue. And then about the violence against journalists, you're right. I've said that in my introduction. There are different contexts. To give an example, in Malta, with the murder of Daphne Caruana Galizia, it was very clear that we have had an involvement of public actors in the murder, and there are investigations, and now there are some condemnations, and so we are seeing that it's not only important to have investigations and prosecutions, but also to see some real reforms in the justice system. I must say that we are working very hard with the Maltese authorities to change the system and to verify again the correct implementation of the reforms. In other member states, it's more in relation with criminal organizations. Of course, like we have seen with maybe the investigations about the murder of Peter de Vries, but also in Greece, there are many indications about that kind of threat coming from the criminal organization. And I've seen in the last hours the comments about the threats against your prime minister also coming maybe from criminal organizations. So we need to make the difference. And there are different tools to fight against that. But it's also very important to combat criminal organizations. And I will say there are not only actions at the national level. We need more and more cross-border actions. And I don't want to elaborate on this because we are confronted for the moment with huge debate also at the EU level about that. Just to give an example, e-evidence, how it's possible to have access to e-evidence in another member states where you are trying to investigate or to prosecute some criminal organizations. So we need to make the difference on this. But about the journalists, there are not only physical violence, like also for other public actors, there are many threats in the social media and injustice. And so we try to work with the platforms to moderate and to mitigate the different threats against public actors. And you know that we will maybe come with a new proposal to put hate crime on the list of Eurocrimes, and we try to harmonize the legislations in different member states about the fight against hate speech and hate crime. And it will be important to continue to work in the DSA that we are discussing now with the co-legislators, but also in with other tools to fight against hate speech, hate crime, and harassment through social media. But we try also to find again the so-called slaps, different kind of lawsuits. And you know that in some member states there are accumulations of lawsuits against journalists or against other public actors. And there we are working on a possible legislative initiative to refrain such a kind. But you know that it's a very sensitive issue because we need to be balanced between the right to defend yourself against defamation, but also to protect journalists against a multiplication of actions in justice. So that are the main elements that we are discussing. And the Vice President of the Commission, Vera Jourova, is working with Thierry Breton on this. We will come with maybe a new media act to be very active on the protection of the journalists.
Many thanks already, but I have a hand from Henk Otten who wants to you have a question, Henk?
Yes, I have a question. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Reynders, for attending. I have actually two questions. As you know, the Dutch government has not followed up on any of the Greco recommendations. What in your view can we do to increase the compliance with the Greco recommendations? Because it has been discussed also in the Senate many times, but my feeling is the follow-up is quite slow. So how can we speed that up? That's my first question. And my second question also connects with your previous remarks. And that is that we see in the Netherlands, but also globally, but especially also in the Netherlands, a very rapid rise, a very worrying rise of fringe groups with all kind of conspiracy theories that are becoming more and more radical and also violent. I think our rule of law at the moment, our system is maybe not totally suited to deal with these sort of radical groups. For example, in Germany we have the Bundesverfassungsschutz, but that sort of institution is not present in the Netherlands. How do you see this, which is, I think, a global phenomenon, but I think we have seen a lot of this during the corona pandemic in Holland. How do you see this? How should we, as with the rule of law in the back of our minds, how should the Dutch system deal with this, in your view? That were my questions. Thank you.
Yes. Could you answer? No. Unmute. We can't hear you.
I come back, but it's maybe better to take some questions. If you have other questions, I don't know. If you don't have, I will maybe 2 or 3 questions again, and we will.
Yeah, but perhaps Ruud has another question. Ruud, you have the floor.
Oh.
Yeah, I had one other additional question. That is, you also mentioned under the 4th criterion of other institutional issues, the checks and balances and the importance of the role of national parliaments. As you know, there has been a long debate on the trilogues and the documents of the trilogues being available for the national parliaments. And could you tell us a little bit more about this interinstitutional register of documents of trilogue that is being proposed to be available also for the national parliaments, in order to be that the national parliaments are really informed so that they can really play their role. Thus far, it is very difficult for national parliaments to really get a grip on these trilogues.
To have formal grip. Informal grip they already have.
Yeah. First of all, I want to answer maybe the question of Henk Otten about the Greco. Of course, to be very clear, it's very important to see a real follow-up to the recommendations of a body like the Greco, because I said we are working with the Council of Europe, and I went again during the last plenary in Strasbourg. I went again to the Council of Europe to see the Secretary General, to see the Venice Commission, and to discuss with all those bodies. And of course, the Greco is very important, and so we want to organize the process to have a clear follow-up. So first of all, we are asking to the Greco what are the reaction of the Greco about the follow-up in the different member states. And to be very clear, it will be an important task for your parliament with the new government in the Netherlands, when you will have a new government, to see what is the timeline to implement different recommendations. Because that's the most important element. If we want to have a real positive evolution, it's very important to have a real timeline about the way to organize different reforms in compliance with the Greco report. And I agree with you that it's very important to do that, and to be sure that there's an increasing vigilance about the way to take into account the recommendations. And I will say it's so important that if we want to push pressure on some member states with a real lack of fight against corruption, of course, it's very important that the different other member states are leading by example. And so if we want to have a correct implementation of different reforms in other member states, sometimes it's very clear that we need to implement the reforms in the other member states. And I know that sometimes it seems to be not a necessity. I want just to inform you that when I've discussed with some Scandinavian countries about the fight against corruption, it's more a question of culture. They don't have so many laws, but there are many efficient, and they are very high in the ranking about the fight against corruption. But I said also in those parliaments, it's maybe needed to put into place some laws, because you don't know. what should be or could be another majority or another situation in the future. So again, to lead by example is very important, but you're right, it will be a task for your parliament and maybe the next government to come with a timeline about the implementation of the different kind of recommendation from the Greco. About the radical organizations, it's true that it's an increasing risk for all societies to see radicalization. We have seen that not only in the political debate, of course, we have seen that also with many organizations in the civil society, of course, and sometimes with different kind of violences. Also doing demonstrations in different member states. We have seen the expression of radical views, not only by some position on the social media or in the public debate, but also by the use of violences in the society. And it's true that it must be a part of our analysis on the checks and balances. And to be very concrete, it's one of the goals of those visits to the national parliament. I will be very pleased to receive from your parliament maybe some comments about what you are seeing and what you are analyzing in the society in the Netherlands about that, because we tried to see, you know, to give example, in France, it was more with demonstration every Saturday, from the yellow jacket to the anti-vax now. And so there are different evolutions with radicalization of positions. But we are very interested to receive information about the different ways to see the radicalization in the member state. I don't want to repeat what I've said about hate speech. Of course, when it's become to be violent through the messages or through physical violence, we try to react, and we try to react with also initiative at the EU level. And of course, the fight against hate speech, the fight against different kind of radical messages, it's a part of our discussions now. When I'm thinking about the definition of the Eurocrime, it will be a part of the work. So again, I will be very pleased to receive, and in the preparation maybe on the next report, to receive more information from your parliament or from civil society organizations about the situation of radical groups also in the Netherlands. About your question, Mr. Cole, about the trilogue, of course, I'm not against an information of the national parliament. I will say the collaboration between the national parliament and the EU institution will be maybe a part of the conference of the future of Europe, because we are discussing about the next step. But if you want to be very concrete on the next steps, I want to say that we are very transparent at the Commission level. So we are providing to the national parliament all legislative proposal. Well, we are putting a legislative proposal on the table in the 24 different languages in the European Union. So when we are coming with a proposal, we are given all the elements of our proposal to the national parliament. Then it's more a question for the Council to see if there is a readiness from the Council and from the Parliament in the trilogue to give more information in the different steps forward, in the different steps before to have an agreement. I know that it's a sensitive issue for the Council, so maybe you will have a discussion with your new government to see what is the position of your government in such a case. I want just to say that as a former member of the Council during many years, of course, it may be important, you're right, to give a clear information in some steps. But you know, in many discussions, there are also some necessities to have a possible dialogue with closed doors between the co-legislators. But you're right, maybe for some steps, it's important to show where we are before to go further. But again, at the beginning, the Commission is very transparent. We are coming with our proposal. Then it's in the hands of the co-legislators and certainly in the hands of the Council to decide to provide to you more information. So you will have to discuss that with your new government, and maybe to discuss that because the national parliament are taking part in the conference on the future of Europe, to express such a request also in the conference and to see what are the possible elements. I want to say that when we have discussed, to give an example, the DCC, the digital COVID certificate, I've asked to the Council and the Parliament to decide in less than 2 months on our proposal. Of course, it's quite difficult to consult on all the different steps, the 24 national parliaments on this. But again, I'm fully aware that there are very sensitive issues sometimes, and we need maybe to find a way in between to let some room for negotiations to the co-legislators, but not to wait the final text before to communicate. So we are given the first one. Maybe it's possible to give some more information in between, but that will be again more a discussion with the Council, because if I may, we try to be very transparent from the Commission with the initial proposal that we are putting on the table. And to us, if it's possible to stay with the initial proposal, it's fine. But of course, we are also looking to the amendments coming from the co-legislators.
Still have 8 minutes, 6 minutes, Mr. Commissioner? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Bastiaan, and I want to say something. Bastiaan.
Yes, thank you. I'm actually also, together with Senator Oomen, a member of the plenary of the Conference on the Future of Europe, representing the Senate. And there, of course, democracy and rule of law are also being discussed also with the citizens. And I think it's also an important topic from that respect. My question is what you, as Commissioner responsible for this area, would hope that the outcome could be of the COFA in this regard. Some people are hoping for a treaty revision, actually, and would it be possible to think of maybe a revision of the treaty in which the rule of law would get a firmer place within the treaty, including enforcement mechanisms? Because is not the fundamental problem that we have the Copenhagen criteria before admission to the EU, but once member states are admitted, the Copenhagen criteria can no longer be enforced in the same way. So I just wanted to have your reflections on that, if you can. Thank you very much.
No, thanks for your question, Mr. Appeldoorn, because of course it will be an important issue to discuss about a possible revision or not of the treaties, because you know that there are different possible steps, or we are moving forward without any change in the treaties, or we are speaking about a real convention after the conference and we start to think about a revision of the treaties. Of course, if we are doing that, it will be important maybe to think about some changes in the Article 7 procedure. You know the majority rules in the Article 7, so it's quite difficult to stay with that if there is a change in the treaty. But also without any change, I want just to insist on 2 points. The first one, it's a question of political will. I said that in the previous life, maybe from the last century, I've started as Minister of Finance. And I've seen an increasing in the peer review between the member states and with the Commission, of course, on the budgetary situation. It was possible to discuss euro by euro the different budget in the different member states. And due to the bank crisis and then the sovereign debt crisis, we have intensified such a kind of process with the open semester, with different kind of other tools. Unfortunately, we didn't have the same process about the Copenhagen criteria. So we have organized that for the Maastricht criteria, coming from the Netherlands, but not from the Copenhagen criteria. And it was a pity, because it seems to be like it's granted that if you have a good situation about the rule of law during the accession process, it's forever. And it's not true. In all the member states, there are possible risks. And so it's the reason why since 4 or 5 years, with some colleagues at that time in the Council, I've start a discussion about the peer review on the values, on the rule of law, on the democracy and the fundamental rights. Because it's not granted. We are sure that we need to take care of this. But I will say that's the first element. It's a question of political will. And you see that for the moment, there is a political will. Because since the beginning of this mandate, we have published 2 rule of law reports. We are discussing the second one in less than 1 year, because the first one was on the 30th of September last year. So in less than 2 years, we have had 2 reports. And you see that there are more and more discussions about the rule of law, not only in the Commission, not only in the European Parliament, not only in the national parliament, but also in the Council. I've had many meetings in the Geneva Council with not only a general debate, but a peer review on the different member states, 5 by 5, in the different meetings that we have had. And there are also discussions in the Open Council, like about a new tool, the conditionality. And now we have a new tool, the conditionality, and we are discussing the rule of law in the way to make a link between the budgetary situation and the rule of law. If you don't have a full respect for the rule of law, it will be possible to stop or to suspend the funding. And due to your question, I have had the opportunity to explain that we are doing the same with the Recovery and Resilience Plan. We are taking into account some remarks about the rule of law coming from the country-specific recommendations. So I want to answer to your question in two ways. First, of course, if it's possible to discuss about some treaty changes, why not, to enhance the capacity? But we have new tools with the rule of law report as a preventive tool and the dialogue, but also a more effective tool if there are some breaches, the conditionality, and we continue to go to the court with infringement proceedings. And of course, it's possible to have a better definition of the rule of law in the treaty. But if you look to the situation, we have a very strong and robust methodology in our rule of law report. And we are organizing the analysis in the 27 member states on the basis of very clear standards. The standards are the treaties, Article 2, to give an example, but also the rulings of the European Court of Justice, the ruling coming from Strasbourg, the European Court for Human Rights, also the Council of Europe recommendations from different bodies, and also for the Committee of Ministers. So the set of standards is more and more clear. And the problem now is the political will, maybe to change the treaties, but certainly to act. And to act, it must be very clear to all the member states that there are some principles. And you need not only to fulfill the Maastricht criteria to organize the economic and social convergence, you need also to fulfill the Copenhagen criteria, and you need to show that you are sharing the same values. And it's not an imposition coming from Brussels. It's a treaty. It's an agreement from the member states themselves during the accession. So now we are trying to work on this. So if you have the opportunity to discuss that in the conference, I'm sure that it's maybe possible to change the treaties, but it's more important to have a real political will to organize a very efficient process about the values, like we have tried to organize a very efficient process about the budgetary situation. I know that in the Netherlands, you are committed to both. I know that you are very concerned about every euro spent in the different programs at the EU level, but you're also very concerned about the values and the promotion of the values in all the member states. So thanks for that. But again, it's possible to work on it with a real political will. And I'm hoping that it will be, again, a main priority for your future new government.
Mr. Reynders, Mr. Commissioner, you were very, very good. It was not only the knowledge, but also your commitment to the rule of law. And I think that the rule of law is of major importance, not only for the EU, but also for our citizens. Besides, if the rule of law is absent in some of our European countries, then it's also a very bad example for our big neighbors. What I can promise you is that for sure, in the next meeting which we will have on the rule of law, together with the Committee on European Affairs, it might be in January, that at that time we come back to you and give you all the results which we have, because we are absolutely united in our committee to do something. And we can also do it together with Greco, which is, for the big part, financed by the European Union. And we also thank you for that. And we do also our best in Strasbourg to look over that not only the countries of the European Union, but also other countries fulfill the obligations. Many, many, many thanks. I hope to see you soon. And thank you for the time you gave to us. many
Thank you,
thanks.
and it will be a pleasure to come, of course, for a physical meeting. Maybe when you will have a government in the next months or years, I don't know.
Okay, okay. I hope it will be
Thank you very
sooner.
much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much indeed. Bye-bye.